We're live. Isn't that great? Hello, everybody. Elliott and I just are going to have a little discussion tonight on a topic that we talked about recently, and we made some uh, preliminary notes, and we just thought we'd share the notes and our thoughts with you, and just go wherever the conversation takes us. It's an important area. That it's basically public speaking and communications, right, Elliott? Is that what we're going to cover this evening?
I was planning on a little public speaking talk. Um, I recently, just this past Saturday, I taught the public speaking merit badge at the Coweta District Flint River Council Merit Badge Day down at Coweta Charter Academy. I had just to open up with a funny little story about that. I suppose I had 5 kids signed up to take this class. And as things tend to go, sometimes they don't go as planned, and you have to learn how to work through those things. So I ended up teaching public speaking to the one student who ended up showing up. So that was a bit of a challenge, I'll admit. And as far as the what is it called, youth protection rules go, we have to have two deep leadership. So there was just the one student and I, so I had to run downstairs and ask what's his name, Mr. Mickey Goodwin, to provide me another adult so that I could have two deep leadership there, because there just wasn't enough kids. There was just the one. And
Mhm.
either way, I had it planned out in my head to, you have to have enough time to prepare some speeches for the public speaking merit badge, as well as give the speeches. Uh, it didn't take very long for the single student to both prepare and deliver his speeches, also because he came prepared with some prerequisites and had one of his speeches outlined, written completely, and practiced. And he did very well, but we ended up finishing before lunchtime, so we had another about 3.5 hours to kill after lunchtime, or I'll say 3 hours or so to kill right after lunchtime, and we ended up watching a few more speeches. We watched some John F. Kennedy, some Martin Luther King, some Ronald Reagan, a little bit of Barack Obama, just some well-known speakers, especially the three former presidents of the United States. Of course, to be the president of the United States, you have to be somewhat of a fair public speaker. But I digress.
I, no,
That's what
that's
I
not
did, and
a
that's why I
digression.
wanted to talk about it.
That's not a digression at all. That's what we're talking about tonight. We're just talking about public speaking. I believe you are going to work up a scrolling thing where we can see some of the notes we made that were ahead of this.
I did a little bit better than that,
Uh,
and I took your document.
By the way, I just want everybody to know that we're not just about scouts. We're about young people everywhere, whether they're in scouts or they're in church groups or they're in other types of things. We're trying to help the world. We're trying to help scouts. And so one of the, we keep going back to all these basic scout things, one of which is the scout is cheerful. And so Elliot and I are going to try to keep being cheerful. Okay. And so Scout says he smiles whenever he can. His obedience to orders is prompt and cheery, and defeat does not down him. So we'll go ahead. We're not going to have any defeat tonight. I'm not worried about that. So how about it? Tell me about how we got that rolling script going tonight.
So I didn't quite do the ticker like you'd asked. I broke your rules and I created my own. And I took the document that you gave me and I made a little bit of a. I took my and also took my presentation that I used this past Saturday, and I
Yes.
added some things to it. And I wanted to share some of the things that I found or I find important for public speaking. The first thing, I also want to open this up with a little bit of story time too. As a youth, I participated. I might have even talked about this on our last episode, but as a youth, I participated in something called National Youth Leadership Training, and mine was put on by the Flint River Council in Georgia, and it was one of the most impactful things I think I've ever done as in my life. It was other than I guess having kids. Um, but NYLT, as we all call it, was the thing that introduced me to be able to speak in front of a crowd. Period. It was the first time I ever attempted it. Was doing it for NYLT, in a small sense, in a portion for the as a participant, but later on staff when I was required to give presentations. And that was my first real experience. And I was about, I guess I was 13 or 14 years old at the time. And that was the first time I ever spoke to more than, a small room or a table full of people. Was for the National Youth Leadership Training. And one thing that I remember that stood out to me completely is they had these fun little videos, and they were teaching about just communication and at the very bottom line, the basics of it. And they had a philosopher named Aristotle, which you may have heard of in all of your reading, that you do. Aristotle had a model for communication. It's very simple, very easy to follow, and it shows this. Aristotle's model for communication, you can see at the top, it's the sender, the message, and the receiver. And you can relate these two examples like a pitcher, the baseball, and the hitter, or a salesperson, the pitch, and a customer. And that was, I wanted to find the video and actually put it up on here, but I couldn't figure it out. So there's that at least. I thought that was interesting. And then we'll move on to the thing that was in your documents here, the goals with communication. What would possibly be some goals? And I'll let you take it from there.
Well, what I thought about is when a person is called on to speak, let's just say that one is supposed to speak before one's club or a Kiwanis club or something, and you say, well, what are the goals? Why am I doing this? What are the goals? And so I figured, now there's listeners can make comments or whatever, and information is one. You're just trying to convey information. Another is inspiration. And put that back up so I'll follow in the order. And then entertainment, and then command. Now, command is kind of separate from the others. Command would be, for example, an officer who has to direct his troops to do something. Well, and so command needs to be clear, and it doesn't need to be entertainment. It might need elements of inspiration, and it certainly needs information. But generally speaking, the public speaker is not in a command position, other than maybe having a call to action at the end or at the beginning and end of his presentation. So, but that's not command. It's not you have to pick up the phone now and do so and so. But it is a call for action. But now the information, so these are the goals. We have to think about what those goals are. Now, if you go to by the way, on inspiration, there's a Henry V's speech before the troops at the Battle of Agincourt is one that Shakespeare wrote, and that's a great inspiration speech that I think everybody ought to look up. And they see what he's doing is he said, look, we're outnumbered and all that, but he who sheds his blood this day with me shall be my brother. Be he ne'er so vile, this day will gentle his home abed in England, will hold their manhoods cheap when any speaks who fought with us upon St. Crispin's day. That, you see what I mean? That inspiring the troops, even though they're outnumbered and so forth. And so it's a great speech, and I think people should, every public speaker should kind of read that and several others. Look at the speech at Gettysburg Address. It was the shortest speech. The other man spoke for 2 hours, and then Lincoln got up and spoke for like whatever it was, 3 minutes. Yeah. And Lowell said that man said more in 3 minutes than I did in 2 hours. And it was and that's an inspiring, because he talks about those people gave their last full measure of devotion, and that we here need to continue in that great course upon which we are involved. At any rate, so back. How about the next group? Now we've talked about communication. What is it we're trying to do? the goals. Okay. Now,
Yeah.
the knowing your audience, I think, is extremely important. And that was one thing that was kind of interesting when you said you only had that one person there for your audience. That's one thing about. Go ahead.
I was gonna say it certainly made it interesting for a public speaking class uh, to be so personal there.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, you before I get into the little points here, we can think about. I think about if you have a very large audience, you cannot really invite feedback and questions and answers because there's always these people that are going to stand up and they aren't going to ask a question. They're going to make a long statement. So if you have like a room of 500 people in it, it's just not conducive to feedback. Now you can try to be sensitive to what the audience is feeling and thinking and emoting. Now, the smaller the audience gets, though, the more you can kind of invite feedback. And so, if it's even interruption, so you're going, let's say, a group of 8 people. If that's who you're speaking to, you can say, "Look, if I say something, just go ahead, interrupt me. We're just a group of people here," because that's what we want to do. Is we want to connect with the people that we're talking to. And so that's where that whole thing about if you have a written out speech and you're just reading it point by point, it might not match the fact that suddenly only 3 people are in the room. In fact, I don't think reading a speech is a very good idea at all. Winston Churchill used to write out his speeches completely and then practice them some before he did it. And he tried to get everything just right. And people that are in the diplomatic service or the president now, our current president just talks a lot just off the top of his head. But it's real easy to say the wrong thing in the diplomatic senses. And so you got to be careful about that. So let's get back to our little list there. Somebody told me once that you know your audience. Think about this. Young people want to talk about the future. Middle-aged people generally want to talk about current events, and old people like to talk about the past. Now, that's just a generalization. But when you get to toward the end of your speech, whether they're young, middle-aged, or old, then that call for action, even the old, for example, if we're talking about inspiring people to help with scouting, that's just an example. It's even if you're old, contribute your time, your money, your wisdom to people who need it. Now, then I've put on here, why are they there? Why are the people there? And they're there because it's their club meeting, or they're there because they've come to see you, or they're there because their best friend brought them there. And so getting that,
and the idea that's being presented by multiple speakers too. There could, because it could just be more than you as the speaker.
Good.
It might be there for the subject matter in general.
Yes, and that's one thing about public speaking, I think, is that flexibility where you get there and you think it's going to be this way, but it kind of works out to be that way. And so you're flexible. That's one reason I'm a big fan of live music at whether it be a wedding or a scout event or a funeral, is to have live music so that the musicians can alter what they're doing to fit the time frame. I remember I saw a wedding once where I've seen a couple of weddings where they played recorded music and it just went on and on and on. And the couple had to sit there and try to look loving into each other's eyes and all that for like 2 minutes. And it just didn't work. So anyway, why are they there? And then, do they know you? That I think that's one you added in, isn't it?
I added that in there a little bit, yes, because it is important. Yeah.
Do they know you? Sometimes I have appeared as Baden Powell, and some people know Baden Powell, and some don't know Baden Powell. So I have to, what is the group, the audience? Do they know Baden Powell or they don't? Do they know anything about scouting? Do they know about the subject? Let's go to the next. Let's see here. All right, now here's some rules I say that, and you can take it for what you want, but dress up. I don't think people want to see a sloppy person up there whose clothes are just hanging off of him and all that kind of stuff. I'm not saying you have to wear a, tuxedo with a white tie and all that, but your clothes should be neat and clean and not baggy, and they shouldn't. I don't think your audience, no matter who they are, wants to see a slob up there, and so dress up. Uh, I think you should try to be, let's just say, in the top 10% clothing wise of everybody in the room. Uh, Certainly not at the bottom 10% or bottom 20 or bottom 30%. It just doesn't. It's almost like you haven't respected them when you show up. If you got on a uniform, wear it properly. Have it tucked in. Have the if you're wearing a neckerchief, have it be proper. And these are things that I think we can talk about to people all over the world and scouts all over the world. The scout is standing up there now. What does he represent? He represents scouting. And what is scouting? Scouting is something that's what we want our children to be and to grow up and to do. And so, do we want them to, be all kind of sloppy and all that? No, that's not what we want. Do we want them to be smoking a cigarette while they're talking? No, that's not what we want. We want them to dress up. All right, back to the list. So, stand up. Now, when I say stand up, what I mean is get yourself up there. Learn to have some body language. Body language is very important, and it's underrated. When you stand up, you don't necessarily have to be in a rigid military look, but have your shoulders back, your chin up, and then speak up. Now, I think this is really important because I've seen a lot of people who would have had a good presentation, but nobody in the back could hear them. And so I always say, and this is very important, talk to the people in the back of the room. Make sure that the people, and even ask out, say, look, it's 500 people here today, and can y'all hear me in the back? And if you can, wave your hands, and if you can't, wave something else, but speak up. And it has to, and don't just mumble your thing and you're talking about this and you got to speak up. Stand up, speak up, shut up. Now the shut up is what I say, never abuse a captive audience. It's like you go in and there's these people, they're there, and how long do they expect you to give this speech? If they expect an hour-long speech, I suggest you end it at 55 minutes. Always speak, just don't abuse people by just going on and on and on, and then they think, oh, thank God he's stopping now, and then the guy adds on another sentence and he brings up another thing. So you have to know enough about what you're doing and have enough notes so that you cover the points you need to cover, and then when you do, shut up. Right?
Right. Absolutely.
All right. And I think especially in the smaller groups, 30 people, 40 people, then there can be a question and answer period. But if there's going to be a question and answer period based on the size of the room or whatever the circumstances are, leave enough time so that if I'm up for 30 minutes, I'm going to leave about 12 minutes at the end for the questions and answers, and hope we don't get one of those long-winded people that's making their own statements. I've seen that, and nobody likes that. But all right, what are we going to say?
A little bit of storytelling is good, especially if you can make it personal and personable as well, and relatable. Because a good way to keep an audience engaged is with good storytelling, and because it goes across industry, it goes across beyond just a scout setting. It could be a business setting, it could be a friendly setting. Storytelling goes, anybody can relate to a good story.
Well, sometimes another point is a lot of folks say when you're giving speech, you start off with a joke, and so you don't need it. It's not required. I noticed that I think that Joel Osteen is a very good public speaker. He works out his whole sermon. He says, I like to start with a little joke, and there was a man walking with his wife and so forth. And he keeps it short. He keeps it clean. It's a funny little joke, and it relaxes people. And so that's just an example. Anyway, let's go on to the next one.
Okay. Well, this is kind of where this is where we go off script a little bit. See, this is what I was using for my class. I call it the W's and how.
Okay, why don't you go ahead first then?
So just communications at its basics, like we were talking about Aristotle and the sender and the message and the receiver. So everybody knows who, what, where, when, why, and how. Everybody knows that little phrase, and you can apply it here to communication. And we got to talk about who is it, the person or the group. It's the sender, and that's who the person who starts the communication. If it's a public speaking setting, of course that would be you, the speaker. What is the message that's being conveyed, including information, ideas, or feelings, or a call to action? Like we were discussing earlier. Yes.
Could we say, that's interesting that you have on there feelings, because
Right.
feelings are, and that's where public speaking is important, to get that feelings feedback, or to try to convey that, and not necessarily getting up and try to make people feel pity for the something, but feelings I hadn't even thought about that. That's a good point to raise, is that sensitivity to the feelings that underlay everything that's going on there.
It's engaging. Another thing we'll touch on a little bit later is authenticity is engaging. And if you're a speaker, you're going to also have feelings about the subject matter, about the situation you're in, about the audience, or even about yourself, the fears that you may be experiencing. Because public speaking is the number one fear across human beings, which is kind of funny that we're sitting here talking about it so casually, like it's not terrifying, because it is. It is scary.
That reminds me of one thing I have said, is that when I've done criminal law work in courts, and I've had and before I put a witness on the stand, I try to say, listen, think about the judge as being like an uncle of yours who used to love you when you were a child, and now he's listening to your story. And so you don't want your arms crossed up and conveying with your body language and your expressions that you don't like him, or you hate him. And then when you talk to the jury, you look at them. That's another thing, is when you talk in public speaking, I think it's real important to sit there and kind of make the eye contact with everybody, so that if you can, and try to make sure that everybody around the room is engaged, and they'll be more engaged even if you throw out the questions like, why is it that we are here tonight? Let's think about this together. We have a problem in the world, and that problem is people don't tie their shoes, or whatever it might be. But you see, you've asked them that, and they're going, what is the problem, and how are we going to address that problem, and so forth. Okay, the settings are mediums. Yeah, all right, face. And you were talking about where.
Like I said, of course, our main focus here today is going to be public speaking. But I just figured this would be a good thing to add, because I used this for the communication mirror badge when I taught that in the fall. The setting, where is the setting or medium through which communication occurs. In this case, it may be a small crowd, a big crowd, a stadium, possibly. Who knows? However big, a clubhouse, whatever it may be. When would be the timing of the communication, which can impact how the message is received. Like, let's talk about us for a moment. It's currently 9:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This happens to be the best time for me and Walker both to be able to sit here and have this communication between us, and for you guys, the audience, as well. Although you may consume this at 3:00 in the morning, or maybe on your commute to work, or what have you. Anyways, all that is important, depending on what message that you're trying to send, or the feelings that you're trying to convey. The time of day is important, or the time of year is important. Even the time of week could be important to help whatever message that you have to go out.
That's right, and it may be put together right behind some tremendously important event.
For instance, listening to the radio in the mornings, news about bad traffic on the way to work doesn't nearly have as big of effect on me as it does on the way home.
Oh, I was going to say something else about the where.
Yes.
That's it. Sometimes it's just almost unavoidable, but there are many venues, many places that have very poor acoustics. And so that's one reason why you need to speak up. I mean, I've been in a lot of places where you think you're talking loud enough for people to hear you at the back of the room, but you're not. And and then also I have noticed, and I can think of a particular place at Scout Camp where the acoustics are terrible because the walls reflect sound quickly. And a sound engineer told me, look, what you need is this, this, and this. And also the fan is going on the air conditioning and the heating thing. So there's this roaring that's back behind everything. That's one thing that's good about these you and your little studio there and me in my home studio is we don't have stuff going on behind us that
Right.
we're used to, but that's interfering with the speaker. How about we do what?
Can you hear anything from my background? Because my
Oh,
background is
I
quite
can't.
loud at the
I don't
moment.
hear your heating going on. I don't hear children screaming or anything like that.
All of that is happening, so that's incredible. My microphone must be very selective.
There must be. There must be.
And so can audiences be sometimes too. So you have to take that into consideration.
Yeah, that's right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my phone off before somebody calls me. That's another thing is that it really helps to at the beginning of a speech say, listen, everybody, I love you, but would you all please turn your cell phones to silence so we're not just interfered with on that and so
Right.
forth. All right, what's our next point here?
I believe we're at why, and that would be the purpose or goal of communication. And
Yeah,
we actually touched on that quite a bit before, whether it's to inform, persuade, entertain, build relationships, or command or call to action type thing as well. So we don't need to dive back into that too much. And then how is the method or process of delivering the message, including tone, body language, and choice of words, which are very important.
well, another thing is that you might be using a speaker, a microphone, and so of course you need to make sure all that's working before you get
Right.
cranking with it. Because I almost don't like microphones. Sometimes it's unavoidable. But if you're in a place where you've got a microphone, but the acoustics are terrible because the walls are just flat and hard and there's nothing to absorb sound. A guy told me that the best place, the sound engineer said the best place for sound absorption is a library, and a library where the books are odd and the sound passes through before it finally passes through all kinds of the maze of books and then hits a wall and starts coming back. So that's it. And he also said that I've read, I had some problems with projects I was working on. And so there's a thing about mass, big, heavy things absorb sound better than like just a sheetrock wall or something.
Mhm.
You don't
Right.
want to be, you don't want to be, you might find yourself giving a speech in what's essentially like a drum almost. So
Well, we both
sometimes,
remind ourselves the scout motto.
yeah, be prepared. And if you're at a campfire, like for example, there might be 200 people at a campfire, and yeah, they have a microphone, but maybe your best bet is just to speak up real nice and loud and make sure the guy in the back can hear you. Because some of those things are just they're not worth the effort, in my opinion. But sometimes you have to have that. All right, what do we got next?
Are you familiar with TED Talks?
Oh, everybody's familiar with TED Talks. I hope our listeners are. But
Good.
so
I just wanted to touch on it just briefly because I think it's important if you want to be a public speaker, it's a good idea to study up on good public speech. And a great place to consume that type of thing is with TED Talks.
I agree
Even if
with
you're
you.
not even if you're not necessarily interested in the content, it's a good thing to watch a professional do it really well. And a lot of TED talkers that I've noticed, not all of them, a lot of them are not only very good public speakers, but they're also members of the Toastmasters International Club, like you were telling me about before. The
Yes.
TED stands for Technology, Entertainment, and Design. It's an American Canadian nonprofit media organization that posts international talks online for free distribution under the slogan "Ideas Change Everything," also known for the slogan "Ideas Worth Spreading." And I just briefly, I didn't even really want to get into any TED Talks or anything. There was a short video that I couldn't get to work, but it was telling about um, the way it was a really nice video, and maybe I can find a link to it and post it up on here afterwards, like for
Oh,
when the
people can find it easily. And
people
I
can.
one thing about TED Talks is they almost they don't just put anybody up there on the stage. They make sure the person can give us a public speaking. Uh,
Right.
they they have some. You either have to send in a sample of what you do, or they have a total review of what you do. But it's they are great. You're absolutely right, and
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up.
And one of the guy the video that was just previous to this slide that I'm not able to pull up at the moment. Um, and I'm not going to go through all the bullet points because I kind of want to. We're moving on to 31 minutes right now, and I kind of want to keep this under 45 if I can. But basically, what he had said was, as you're speaking, what you're doing, you're making a physical difference in your audience's brain. You have an idea that has a certain, let's say there's a certain shape. And as you begin to talk about whatever it is your idea is, that shape starts to form in everybody's heads all at the same time. So if you present your idea in such a way, piece by piece, little by little, the image that you have of the idea, and this is all metaphorical in a sense, that that idea that's actually a physical thing inside of your head is now being formed in all of your audience's head. I just really liked that video. I'd like to find the link and put it on our the description of this video when we get it up so that others can see it too. And
Yeah.
like I said before, a lot of the TED Talkers are members of the Toastmasters International Club. And if you want to, if you would tell us a little bit about Toastmasters, if you know much about it. If you don't, I've got bullet points.
Well, I was just going to say uh, my father did a lot of things that in terms of trying to be a self-improvement. He was a dentist and he was a member of Toastmasters back in the late 1940s. And so I've never been a member, but I know what they have, little practice talks. You go there and you listen, and then people tell you they tell you what you did well and what you didn't do so well, and you get better by practicing. And that's what it's about. And if every everybody that feels like they need some improvement on their public speaking should consider finding a local Toastmasters group. I think they meet mostly at breakfast, but they maybe have them in the evening after work. But times when busy people can get there and spend the 1 hour and do that. So anyway, let's move right on then. Toastmasters.
Toastmasters, yeah. That's all. I just and
That's
just to give some just
people
to
can.
give a little more validity to it,
That's right.
founded in 1924,
Mhm.
founded by Ralph C. Smedley in Santa Ana, California in 1930. The first official Toastmasters club outside of California was in British Columbia, Canada. Through the 50s and 60s, they expanded globally. In 1985, there was over 100,000 members in 4,000 clubs. That's kind of crazy. And today, there's there's over 270,000 members across 148 countries. So it really is a big thing. It's a big thing. And if you want to be a public speaker, it's almost you should just find one and just go visit if you can.
Yeah, that's right. If you don't join, at least visit and
Yeah.
or read up. And I'm sure they have books you can look at. But
And
book.
bukus of videos on YouTube with just anything they would say in the club would be on YouTube as well.
Yeah, all right.
Anyways, um, something that another thing that I didn't put this together myself, but I found it when I was preparing to teach the class this past Saturday. It was a gentleman giving a talk about public speaking, and I'm going to call it the AAA method. He didn't call it that. He just called it the 3 A's of public speaking. And I was like, come on, AAA method sounds fun, doesn't it? The first point of it was that authenticity engages. The second one is awareness connects. And the third one is audacity informs and inspires. And I'll tell you a little bit about what I mean by that. And the authenticity engages. Be yourself. Speak from the gut and connect with the audience by being real. Young people like to say, come on, be real with me, be real with me. And it's true. The more real you are, the more heard you will be, because people respect authenticity. Know yourself before seeking advice. He gave an example here, and I'm going to reuse his example, and I'm going to say it as if it were me. I was getting ready to teach that class on Saturday, and I was trying to decide, it's a public speaking class. Do I need to have a PowerPoint with me? So I decided to ask everybody and my friends and family, I asked them all, Mom, should I have a PowerPoint? Yes or no? Yes, you should. You want something to have your back up. I asked my brother, do you think I should have a PowerPoint? He says, no, stand on your own 2 feet. Do exactly what you think you should do. Stand on your own 2 feet. You don't need anything else. It's a class about public speaking. I asked my sister, and she said, anyways, there were 6 people I asked, and it was an even tie, 3 and 3, 3 yeses. These are professionals, and these are people that love me and know me and trust me. 3 of them said yes, 3 of them said no, and I didn't ask one person. There was one person who I forgot to ask. I forgot to ask myself. So know yourself before you seek advice. Understand your strengths and weaknesses before asking for feedback. That's something that I've always struggled with myself. I'm always like, am I doing the right thing? But I'm never asking me that question. I'm asking others, are you sure? What do you think I should do? I know what I think I should do, and I should just listen to me sometimes. The other important thing he said is to show up to give, not to take. So many people, so many
Very good
speakers,
point. Yeah.
mm, so many speakers at the end of everything, they're like, you've got to, or you ask them, hey, how can I improve this? And they say, well, you got to buy my book. You know,
Yeah.
those people aren't necessarily, they're there to take, they're there to sell either themselves or a product, and there's a place for that too. But if you want to be a good public speaker, show up to give, show up to give the people, your audience, the message or the information, and not have any expectations. If you stand back, if you stand in the back waiting to go up, and you're like, I'm going to go up there and get a standing ovation. Don't do that. Don't do that. Show up and think, I'm going to give the best that I can. If I earn a standing ovation, then I earned a standing ovation. I'm going to show up and I'm going to give what I've got here, and I'm going to put it out there, regardless of what happens.
Well, that kind of reminds me of something that we'll probably mention many times on this, and that's the Cub Scout motto, which is do your best.
Mm-hmm. And also, let's think about the Order of the Arrow for a moment. What is the motto of the Order or the Arrow, or the slogan, I guess, is cheerful, friendly service.
Yes.
Giving without the expectation of anything in return. Show up to give when you're showing up to be a public speaker. Show up as a scout, whether you're in the uniform or not, and you'll show up to give.
Yeah.
So, anyways, the next thing, awareness connects. Know your audience. We've talked about that. Research and understand the demographics, the interest, and the expectations of your listeners. Be present in the moment. We spoke about this. Pay attention to the energy and the reactions of the audience and adapt accordingly, like a good musician, like you were speaking of earlier. And develop situational awareness. Be flexible and ready to handle unexpected events or changes in the atmosphere. You were talking about that at the very beginning, and that's that. I just wanted to show that I was with you right there.
Yeah.
And audacity informs and inspires. That was the one I was talking about a little bit earlier as well. Be bold. Don't be afraid to share your opinions and ideas with conviction, because once again, authenticity engages. Use stories to captivate. Stories are powerful tools for engaging the brain and making your message memorable. Embrace vulnerability, sharing personal experiences, stories about you or yourself, or things that you've done or seen or not been able to do or not been able to see, can make you more relatable and impactful. And don't just tell a story, make a point. Use stories to emphasize and reinforce your key takeaways. That's there you go. That's pretty much it. The next thing is just a little list of other tips.
Keep going. Let's go. Let's go to the next list.
Okay. Then
We have that. We have that. Have that, and people can read all this. They can just pop. They can just come along and. I mean, for those who are just going to get the audio version of this, well, they're not going. We don't need to go through all these, but basically, it's just some more points that they can do. All right, let's go. What's the next thing? Um, all right.
that's pretty much it. That was all of it.
All right, that's it for tonight. Well, then, why don't we just wish all of our scout friends and all our other friends, especially young people who, uh, you know, a 12-year-old looking at this ought to be greatly helped because he'll say, you know what, I remember seeing that, those two guys talking about this, and maybe I can go online and find it and go through it again, or maybe it'll just help me. So that's what we're hoping for, is that everything we do can be used by leaders and children and young people to improve their lives and make their lives be more comfortable and productive. And so that's what we're about here in Aids to Scouting.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching.